This podcast is an invitation to feel and experience the souls of famous old Hollywood homes and to have an in-depth journey to the areas where they're located through interviews with longtime residents. Either you're a fan of old Hollywood in Los Angeles, planning to have a vacation, or, an even bigger step, considering a certain area for your future home. This is your opportunity to receive valuable information and insightful advice you won't find anywhere else.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Are you in the mood for California? Today we'll explore Franklin Hills, featuring an interview with wonderful Charles Papert.
So Franklin Hills, I would describe as it's pretty low key and understated. It's quiet. Nobody cuts through Franklin Hills on their way to somewhere else. It's a tiny little maze of streets. So there's not a lot of through traffic. We're not very fancy here. Like some of the hills can be fancy. People are like, oh, you live in the hills. Franklin Hills isn't really particularly fancy comparatively. I don't think we have any, like Lautners or Neuters on the hill. I could be wrong about that. But we do have a lot of great eclectic houses. It's a fairly slender hill from east to west. It's sort of a long, skinny thing from, when you look at it on the map.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the houses have a view to either the east or the west side, and both are great.
Masha Korpacheva is a California-based realtor and a member of the National Association of Realtors in Los Angeles. She's an advocate for selling and buying homes with soul and practicing mindfulness in real estate. With master's degrees in spiritual psychology and linguistics, Masha brings all of her skills to work with her clients. An intuit and empath, she has touched many lives with her outstanding ability to see beyond the visible and helping to come to better understanding of issues and their resolutions. An adventurous world traveler, from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania to exploring the Galapagos Islands, Masha has a particular passion for the City of Angels. Having landed in this paradise and adopted it as her home, she's been sharing old Hollywood stories since 2007. In the mood for California, feel the soul of old Hollywood.
And now, are you ready to experience Franklin Hills? Franklin Hills, a charming residential neighborhood in the hills east of Las Vegas Village, is renowned for its diversity and eclectic architectural styles. At its heart stands the iconic Shakespeare Bridge, completed in 1926, which crosses what was once the perennial stream Arroyo de la Zacatela. To the east of the bridge, the Franklin Hills public stairway system, consisting of 14 staircases built in the 1920s, links the neighborhood's winding streets, offering residents a scenic and historic pedestrian route. A notable landmark, Prospect Studios on Talmadge Street, has a storied history. Originally opened in 1915 as the Vitagraph Studio, it later became the Warner Brothers Studios East Hollywood Annex, then the ABC Television Center, and finally part of the Walt Disney Company in 1996. The area's cinematic legacy is further enriched by the fact that brothers Roy and Walt Disney once lived at the corner of Lyric Avenue and St. George Street in the late 1920s, close to their original animation studio at 2719 Hyperion Avenue. Their walk to work through Franklin Hills inspired some iconic Disney imagery, including the quaint cottages in Snow White. The area is a haven for lovers of architecture, showcasing designs by legends like Frank Lloyd Wright and John Lautner. Homes from different eras reflecting styles from the 1900s to the 1980s are filled with storied past. This diversity is embodied in landmarks like the Disney Brothers twin homes and the elegant, streamlined modern houses from the 1930s. Additionally, in 1960, architect John Lautner was commissioned to build the Midtown School, now the Los Feliz Hills School, a campus that further cements the area's architectural pedigree. The Shakespeare Bridge, originally promoted as a necessary development for the community, has its own dramatic tales, including a tragic incident in 1930. Retrofitted in 1998 following damage from the 1994 Northridge earthquake, the bridge remains a significant, if understated, Gothic revival structure. Franklin Hills also features a remarkable concentration of public stairways, offering a unique urban experience reminiscent of the city's past reliance on public transit. These stairs, such as the Cumberland Avenue Stairway and the Radio Walk, were integral to the daily lives of residents, even in an era dominated by cars. Today, they serve as charming reminders of a bygone era and as practical routes for walkers and fitness enthusiasts. Franklin Hills boasts not just historical significance, but also cultural richness. The neighborhood offers breathtaking views stretching from Mount Baldy to Malibu and features nearby cultural amenities like the Greek Theater, Griffith Park, the Griffith Observatory, and Barnsdall Art Park. Franklin Hills, once known mainly to locals and those keen on its stairways, stands today as a vibrant, historic, and culturally rich neighborhood, truly encapsulating the best of Los Angeles past and present. And here we are. Welcome to Franklin Hills. I'm so happy to have Charles Papert here with me. Charles Papert is a director and cinematographer with credits including classic movies such as American History X and Office Space, and episodic series Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Scrubs, and Key and Peele. He was also one of the creators of the 48-hour filmmaking festival concept. He enjoys exploring Los Angeles for its architecture, design, and history, as well as hamburgers. Charles will share with us what it feels like to live in Franklin Hills. Hello, Charles.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Great. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes, me too. Well, Franklin Hills is just such a charming, beautiful neighborhood, and I was really looking forward to speaking to you about it. And my first question will be, what actually drew you to live in Franklin Hills? And maybe you'll be able to describe this unique atmosphere or lifestyle of the neighborhood.
I moved to Los Angeles in 97, and the first place I lived was on Angus Street, which is in Silver Lake, right on the border, on the hill behind the Trader Joe's there.
Mm-hmm.
It was a friend's house, and he had a room available and like an in-law apartment. And so I got, a taste of East Side living and also hill living, because that was up on a hill also. And that was a really great living situation, except that he ended up selling the house and I had to move. And I said, I don't want to have to get another apartment and get kicked out again. So, well, my friend bought a house and sold a house. I guess I can do that too. And of course, that was in the days when buying a house was actually, within reach of most people, unlike now. So I started looking around. I was actually really into Beechwood Canyon, but rather adorably, the houses I was looking there were about 50,000 more than I was looking at in Los Feliz. And I was like, well, I can't do that. I mean, that's 50,000. I mean, can you imagine that in today's dollars? So I was looking a lot in Silver Lake and Los Feliz. I actually got into escrow in a place on Benton Way in Silver Lake, fell out of escrow on that. I was also looking on Commonwealth in Los Feliz, but mostly in the flats. I didn't really think I could afford the hills. A listing came up on Cumberland Ave in Franklin Hills. Me and my realtor were the first ones on the door, and we closed on that thing. It was on the market for maybe 3 hours.
Wow.
So I don't think I'd ever been on Franklin Hills before that. And suddenly there I was. Now that house needed a lot of work to make it affordable, for me to be able to purchase. I didn't really expect to buy a fixer, but I found my way through all of that because it's a good size house with a great view, and those things were too enticing for me to let go. In terms of the neighborhood itself, and I've been here so now that's 24 years. I bought it in 2000.
Yes, a whole life.
Yeah, it feels like it. So Franklin Hills, I would describe as it's pretty low key and understated. It's quiet. Nobody cuts through Franklin Hills on their way to somewhere else. It's a tiny little maze of streets. So there's not a lot of through traffic. We're not very fancy here. Like some of the hills can be fancy. People are like, oh, you live in the hills. Franklin Hills isn't really particularly fancy comparatively. I don't think we have any, like Lautners or Neuters on the hill. I could be wrong about that. But we do have a lot of great eclectic houses. It's a fairly slender hill from east to west. It's sort of a long, skinny thing from, when you look at it on the map. So most of the houses have a view to either the east or the west side, and they both are great. Mine is to the west. And the proximity to Sunset Junction and also Los Feliz Village is really fantastic. If you need last minute groceries, you're minutes away by car. And if you wanted to walk, it's probably about 20, 25 minutes to just about any place you'd need to get to, which of course for hill living is pretty great. Because it's obviously spots like in the Hollywood Hills where it would take you 20 minutes to drive just to get, a carton of milk. So being up in the air and on a hill, but not remote, is a really great combination.
Right, right. It totally makes sense. And then you mentioned a maze of streets, right? And they're pretty narrow. So would you say it can sometimes be challenging to navigate them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's people who come up here and they're like, I don't know how you can stand it because they live maybe in the valley where you have those beautiful broad boulevards because it was all built so much later. Classic LA hills are narrow and winding. The parking is brutal. My street has one lane of traffic. So you do a lot of backing up to let people pass. So those are the challenges that, might kill it for some people, but it's all just part of it. What tends to happen is that people, when they come over, I'm on the uphill side of the street. So they have to, take some steps up to get from the street to my front door. And then you get inside and there's more steps up to the main level. But once they get up there, they're rewarded with this glorious view. And every one of them says, oh, I get it now.
Right.
It all makes sense to me,
Yes. And that's all after all the exercising that just got climbing the stairs.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, when I have to bring stuff up from my garage back and forth and do 3 trips, I'm like, wow. So this is a good workout.
That's a good workout. That's right. So what about the advantages of living in your neighborhood besides being like so close to grocery stores, and then it doesn't take like 20 minutes to go get some milk? And the views, of course.
Right, of course. Well, so yeah, we talked about the challenges. There's a few other things as well. Hill living can be challenging in terms of settling. My house was expanded in 79. It was built in 38 and then doubled in size in 79. And they're very different construction styles. And the newer part wants to stay where it is, and the older part wants to kind of slide down the hill. I'm exaggerating a bit, but everyone up here has kind of cracks in the walls and so forth, from not just from earthquakes like everywhere, but things move. And there is a little bit of a secret about Franklin Hills. This is maybe going to keep people from trying to buy up here, but the realtors tend to know. Do you know about this, about the composition of our hill compared to, say, Merino Highlands?
Oh, I didn't. Please share.
Okay. So just to clarify for people, so Franklin Hills, there's a series of hills on the east side. Franklin Hills is the westmost of them, which is why I have this amazing view out to the west. Then it comes back down the other side. Hyperion cuts through the middle of it. And then the next hill over is Merino Highlands, which it circles the Silver Lake Reservoir. And that's a taller hill. In fact, the east side of that, where Baxter is and Apex, that's, I think, got the steepest hills in the city. But what I've heard is that the actual geological composition of that hill is more solid in a sense, less shifting than our hill, than Franklin Hills. There's more shale here, I think. New construction, they'll dig caissons down deep into the ground and it's incredibly expensive, but it's not going anywhere. But the topsoil where all these old houses were built tends to shift a little bit more. There's one more thing that I'll tell you about Merino Highlands versus us. On Franklin Hills, those hills, Merino Highlands, they started putting houses up there, they buried all the infrastructure. all the lines go underground, which we have, telephone poles here in Franklin Hills. So I'm a
Right.
little jealous about those two things. But in any event, so they're a little fancier. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I hear you. But still, the feeling I usually get when I come to Franklin Hills is that there is a certain sense of community there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do have a feeling of belonging, probably.
Yeah, I mean, so I moved in, as I said, 24 years ago, and my neighbors, all the surrounding neighbors, except for I think maybe one, were here before me even. There was quite a turnover there in the 90s from the people who grew up, the family houses, people who'd been there for 50 years or more. A lot of those people moved out, and the younger people moved in, which I was one of at the time. And it's interesting because hills don't tend to have sidewalks.
Hmm.
They might have them on one side of the road. We have a partial sidewalk on one side of our street and then not on the other. So it doesn't, and very little front yard also, especially on the uphill side. So there isn't a lot of hanging out in the yards and seeing each other, casually as much. But
Hmm.
we'll chat on the street and, we look out for each other. I actually smelled smoke a few months back and saw some smoke from the street below, and I called the fire department. It turned out to be a pizza oven. I felt really bad that the engine came all the way up here, but I was like, you know what? We had a huge fire about 10 years ago now, maybe not even 10 years, 8 years ago, a massive fire up
Hmm.
here. And yeah, so I just didn't want anyone's house to catch on fire. I was
Of
like, that's better
course.
safe than sorry,
Of course, it's good to be so alert. Great for you that you called 911 right away. That's wonderful.
Hmm.
So, Charles, maybe you could share some of your favorite spots, maybe some coffee shops or stores or restaurants nearby that you like to frequent.
Well, I used to split my time kind of equally between the Silver Lake side and the Los Feliz side. As I said, we're just about equidistant. I'm at the bottom end of Franklin Hills, the south end of it, which is about equidistant to Sunset Junction and Los Feliz Village. In recent years, the junction has kind of upscaled so much, it's not quite my jam anymore, but I'll still go down there. I like to meet people, like Intelligentsia for coffee.
Mm.
Maybe you'll get drinks at the Black Cat or Bar Stella. There's the great gelato place there. Pine and Crane, a fantastic restaurant in the junction, Taiwanese, I believe. I probably spend a bit more time, as I said, in Los Feliz Village. I mean, it's so Hillhurst and Vermont are so filled with great things. It's hard to even know where to start, but Little Dom's, Alcove, Mustard Seed, Lupiat Kitchen, Marate is a new spot on Vermont that's really fantastic. I mean, the dear old Dresden Room. I'm so glad
Mm.
that that's still around.
Yes.
My favorite spot to go to is Mess Hall on Los Feliz Boulevard, which is kind of my cheers. And then we have this great little intermediate thing that's popped up in recent years, the chunk of Hollywood Boulevard that's between Hillhurst and Vermont.
Hmm.
Home state for tacos and Go Get 'em Tiger for coffee. And, Wacko's been across the street there for a while. It's a great store to kind of browse through and look at the books. And they have a little art gallery in there. So yeah, there's no shortage of places and they just keep opening new ones.
Yes, yes, that's wonderful. Well, now moving on to your career path, you began your filmmaking journey while still in high school, which is absolutely
Mhm.
incredible. So, what initially sparked your interest in this field, and how did you actually transition from amateur projects to professional gigs?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Boston. So the film industry was something that was very distant, that was on the other coast, maybe New York. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any direct connection to it as much as I certainly would have dreamed of. But I read a lot of magazines and I soaked up what I could. I studied films. My high school job, I was a movie theater usher. Then I went to film school briefly in New York, quit that after a year because I spent a lot of my time while I was there hanging out on legitimate sets, movies that were being shot in New York, including the original Ghostbusters, which
Mm-hmm.
was incredibly influential on me as at that point, 17, 18-year-old to see how it was actually done finally. So after I left college, I went back to Boston and just started working in the industry and worked my way up. And once I started getting more legitimate film and television work, I moved to LA.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And your work often involves specialized technical requirements, such as
Mhm.
hidden cameras or custom rigs. Can you please maybe share an example of a particularly challenging project and how you tackled it creatively?
Well, I've kind of been a tinkerer for a long time. The first specialized thing that I got into was Steadicam, which I think is fairly well. It's a pretty common term now. It's kind of a household name, but in a very tiny nutshell, it's a stabilized camera rig that one wears on the body that requires a lot of practice to get good at. And I became very fascinated with that in my teen years. The Shining was a movie that I saw that featured the Steadicam, and I said I have to know how
Yes.
that was done. I was so desperate to get into it that I actually built one with from scrap metal
Oh my God, by yourself.
by myself. Yeah, I didn't know how to do it, but I wanted it that badly that I used my dad's power tools down in the basement and came up with this sort of very funky, barely working little Steadicam. But it was enough to know that that's what I needed to get into. And it took a number of years of hard work to afford my first very battered used one. And because of that, I also had to do a lot of customizing to it over the years. So I learned how to design parts and have machinists make me things, which continued on. And so that even once I had the real equipment, I still was always thinking and inventing in my mind. What do I need and how do I, how can I get that made for myself? So that has sort of moved forward into my career, on set when we have to solve an issue, a problem. I might come up with a crazy idea on how to do it, leaning back into my low budget days when I had no choice. And in fact, my key grip for many years, Bodhi, would laugh at me because I'd say, how about if we do it this way? And he'd go, crazy idea, but sure, we'll give it a try. And then afterwards he'd go, all right, that worked. It's just, I've got a little, who's the character from Back to the Future, Doc Brown mind there. So for instance, one of the things that we did once with the hidden cameras, you mentioned that, I shot a spot for Pepsi with a NASCAR driver, in it, Jeff Gordon, where he was in disguise and he had to take an unsuspecting real person for a ride in the back of a taxi that we outfitted with all these hidden cameras. I started learning about the hidden camera shoot for that shoot, and they said, "Oh, that'll take 2 weeks to design and rig." And I said, "We have 2 days."
Mm-hmm.
So the invention there was figuring out how to do it in 2 days. That was more of a management thing, but we were still literally rigging out that car, just holding this guy at a hotel, waiting to get picked up by that taxi as they put the finishing touches on it. It was very close to the wire, but it worked out.
Wow.
And then I think in terms of the most successful thing that I dreamed up and actually took the furthest, was while I was still operating cameras personally. I became a cinematographer who oversees the camera operators. But prior to that, we were doing a lot of handheld shooting that became very popular in the aughts. And I felt there was more flexibility needed in different ways to achieve those shots. And so I designed a rig that would do that combined with parts of the Steadicam. And about 3 years ago, I actually took it to a company and we have a contract to I have a license with them. We got it patented. It's out there working on sets now. It was used widely on The Last of Us on HBO and Madam Web, recent movie, and it's called the ZG.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I was just about to mention that with all do-it-yourself projects, you should probably patent one of your creations, and you just did. This is so wonderful. Wow, that's incredible. Congratulations, Charles.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, when I was, how little kids always are kind of going, oh, I want to be a fireman, I want to be this, and you go through all these different professions when you're very young. There was a period when I wanted to be an inventor because I think I'd been reading about Gyro Gearloose, the Disney character, in a comic book, and I was like, that seems really cool. So it was pretty neat to get a patent and go, that officially makes me an inventor.
Wow. So, your story teaches actually a lesson that, you can do whatever you are doing, whatever you love, but you never have to leave behind your childhood dreams. And in your case, you're both
Right.
cinematographer and an inventor, and you keep implementing everything that you have inside of you into your work. This is such a great lesson.
Well, I did pass on the firefighter part of it, though. I just wanted to slide down the pole. I'm fairly sure that was the only part that interested me.
Okay, that's great. Well, Charles, I would like you to elaborate a little bit on your collaboration with Peter Atencio on Key and Peele. And it is widely recognized for its diverse and unique visual styles across sketches. And how did you approach giving each sketch its unique, distinct look? And what were actually some of the key considerations in this process?
Well, Peter Atencio was the director on all of Key and Peele, and I was the cinematographer on all of it. It was somewhat unusual in that regard. And people often think that there must have been multiple people involved because there were so many styles represented within that show. And each episode had 6 or 7 different sketches that were often wildly divergent in their look and feel. But it was us for all all of them. And when we met, Peter and I met for that show for the first time, it turned out that we had really exactly the same philosophy, which was let's not half-ass the look. Let's make everything, every sketch reflect the style and the source material as closely as possible, whether it was a big budget blockbuster all the way down to crappy looking vintage material. The team on that show, the creative team, was so insanely talented at pulling off really miracles in very little time and money. And you hear that a lot about almost everything because every production was strapped for both
Right.
time and money. But this one, either we were on Comedy Central, it was basic cable. There was very little there for what you see on screen. So it was just the talent of everyone involved, and Peter at the head of it with this vision, pulling it all together. And of course, the brilliance of the writing and the performances more than anything else is what really combined with what we brought to it as another character, which was the look and feel of everything.
Mm-hmm.
My end of it, I would reference source material. If I knew a sketch related to something that already existed, I would go and look at that and just kind of reverse engineer how to emulate that with the tools that we had on hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that you don't have to copycat everything. So you go, okay, we're doing a version of Les Mis. Well, I can go and look to see what camera and lenses were used on the film Les Mis, but to actually change out from what we had on our budget wasn't really going to happen. So it was just, how can I copy that enough? And what I learned was that for most people, if you take it far enough, they'll fill in all the details in their minds. There was a lot of cheating.
Mm-hmm.
We use that term a lot in the film industry, just essentially to say you only need to do so much, and what's just outside the frame lines doesn't exist. But it doesn't matter because people see just enough of it, and they believe they're seeing something that looks almost identical to the real thing.
Mm-hmm. And it also kind of like makes them feel empowered at the same time, because like they don't see it, but they think about it. So, they're participating in the process.
Yes, I agree. And, ultimately, the whole point of that exercise was to add a layer to the comedy. A great deal of Key and Peele involved heightening things that were incredibly minor, but taking them to really absurd heights, situations. And so if we were able to bring a gravitas to the look of the show, that it didn't feel like it was sort of a cheap three-wall set or, kind of a bad wig and all the things that kind of give it away to make it look more like a skit than a sketch, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That they would be that much funnier when things got very absurd within the sketch. But oftentimes it'd start off with the idea that someone would just turn on their TV, and if they saw the first 10 seconds of it, they wouldn't know that it wasn't the actual material, the original, or something that was serious and dramatic, and then we'd turn it on them.
Very interesting. Wow. Such details.
Mm-hmm.
So, Charles, throughout your diverse career, from operating specialized rigs to collaborating on iconic sketches, and what personal or professional lessons have you learned that you believe have truly had the most significant impact on your growth as a filmmaker and as an individual?
That's a big question.
Yes.
I get looking back, and does relate to Key and Peele. I always felt that my personal strength lay in flexibility and being a chameleon and being able to deliver a wide variety of looks, which I thought would make me that much more hireable. But it kind of turned out that it probably hurt more than it helped outside of Key and Peele and other shows like that I did, because after that I got hired for jobs that had a lot of looks, as opposed to me thinking, well, I've shot every kind of style there is, so someone's going to hire me to do that horror film, or they're going to do or that drama because I can show them examples of that. But it might have been better in retrospect to have had a single identifiable look, essentially a branding of style. Who knows? I felt like becoming a flexible cinematographer, I learned a ton about a lot of things, and it kept me from doing the same day after day, which is the whole reason most of us are in this industry anyway, as opposed to a desk job. And I've always been a multi-hyphenate anyway. I direct, shoot, edit, make graphics. I really have the most fun when I'm doing all of these things on my little passion projects, as opposed to working within, one specific job anyway. If only we could make a ton of money doing that.
Right. You have to be a hustler.
Yes, you do have to hustle. And, it's even if you are able to get to the top of this business where you become that person who is creating the overall look of a big project, there's so many other facets of our industry that you have to be able to manage as well outside of the creative. So there's a reason why, a lot of people don't quite get there one way or another. But I know I'm very satisfied and happy to have had all the opportunities that I did.
Mm-hmm. It looks like you've had a lot.
You stick around long enough. The resume gets deep. And the other thing I think that I want to say, because it was interesting that you said, what personal or professional lessons, there is some crossover there, of course. And I think what I had to learn professionally early on was communication skills. I'm essentially middle management. So I get information from above and I have to push information, to the people below me and back and forth. And I learned that you have to be very concise, think very quickly, and use just the right words when you're doing that, because of the speed that everything moves on set and things change extremely quickly, which really kind of requires a very, very left right brain in a perfect balance, because I have to envision a creative concept and then boil it down to these very technical specifics, often within a matter of seconds, and then disseminate that information.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the professional side of it. But in recent years, I've become very focused to bring those skills into my personal life and, try to focus on communication more than anything else, because I feel like it's becoming very problematic for a lot of people in this day and age. The way that we communicate tends to be less face to face or even on the phone. Like it used to be sort of lesser if you called someone on the phone now, and then it became texting instead of calling on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't even know what it is anymore. We don't tend to communicate as well with each other because of technology now. So I'm very focused on how to communicate with somebody the best I possibly can. And I think that's really the key to work through conflicts or, life complications or negotiations.
Yes.
And be effective and efficient. And happier ultimately.
100%. Yes. Communication is actually the main key to being human, because this is what we all are about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree. And I feel like we're losing the thread on that a little bit.
Right. Well, I think that, it's never too late to really take responsibility for our little piece and, focus on this. As you just mentioned, this is exactly what you're doing, and just continuing doing the best every day. And with every person that you communicate, just put your heart into this communication. And this is how people respond in a way.
Absolutely, Maria. Yeah.
Yes. And also, you did mention, how, originally you were like all about flexibility and being some sort of a chameleon rather than adopting a certain style of your own, some sort of branding. I also wanted to mention that it's never too late to create your own style and branding. And right now, maybe after all this incredible job experiences and personal experiences that you've had in your life, you will be able to put it all together and make it into your own brand, because life goes on and there are no limits to what we can continue doing, regardless of age, regardless of time, space. It's just like the moment is right now.
I like that.
Yes. Well, Charles, thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation. I felt
my pleasure.
Yes, it was very soulful, and you shared so much interesting information and shared your beautiful neighborhood with us. And thank you so much for your time and sharing your heart.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye, Charles.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for tuning in to feel and experience Franklin Hills with my special guest, Charles Papert. If you enjoy my podcast, In the Mood for California, please sign up for future episodes at your preferred platform, and please leave your feedback. I really appreciate your time and support. You can follow me on Instagram at In the Mood for California, and check out my website, www.inthemoodforcalifornia.com. I'm a realtor with Beverly & Company Luxury Properties, and my license number is 019-78714. Selling and buying homes with soul is not just my real estate strategy. It is an intuitive and holistic approach that embraces your values, aspirations, and conscious intentions. If you want to discover the power of mindfulness in your real estate journey with my compassionate guidance, I'm here for you. Next time, we embark on a journey to the serene and tranquil Sierra Madre, a place steeped in history and resplendent with natural beauty. I am eagerly anticipating our adventure in this enchanting locale. See you there.
In the Mood for California, Feel the soul of old Hollywood